Welcome to Power to Thrive. I'm Dale Campbell. I'm here with my buddy Cliff Blodgett, best-selling author. And today we have a special guest, water expert, Giovanni. And before we get started, America, hit the subscribe button. As the show is over, go to the comments and let us know what's going on, how you feel. If you want to join us, tell us what your thoughts are. I'm going to hand it off to Cliff.
If you haven't watched part one, definitely do that. We did part one on water, and I'm just going to recite some of the topics that we talked about in part one. We touched on the right amount of water, how much water the human body needs, and the difference between water and other beverages, bottled water versus tap water, and several other subjects. So we're going to continue that with a more in-depth look at certain aspects of water today. We'll get started with contaminants that you find in water. I'll let you kick it off, Giovanni, with that.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. My name is Giovanni again. I've been in the water business for now 17 years. Like you were saying, Cliff, contaminants in the water. A lot of people know most of the basics: chlorine, fluoride. Some of the more out there ones are arsenic. Then you have obviously pharmaceuticals in the water, microplastics. And what's been hitting a lot on the radar lately is radiation. To some of the most basic ones, chloride and fluoride, and chlorine, because there is chloride also in the water. A lot of people might think those aren't contaminants. You know, what we have to wrap our mind around first is when we drink water, when water just comes naturally from nature, it doesn't have these things. It's because of bacteria and other issues that we've now created a process to purify it even more. So we started adding these foreign objects that we don't normally find in our food or body to water to purify it. Now the body's a very wonderful thing, so the body's learned to balance it, but it doesn't mean it's good for the body. Fluoride, some people say it was good for teeth. It actually slows down the cognitive of the brain. We touched on this last time about chronic dehydration, which is what most of the nations actually suffers from. And if you take at least 3 to 5% of the moisture from the brain, which is as simple as daily not drinking enough water, you can get to those numbers. It actually affects the entire body, especially the cognitive. Now you add fluoride on top of that, you're doubling down. So a lot of people probably won't notice it because you're so used to doing it. But if you started drinking pure water that doesn't have any of these contaminants like fluoride and chlorine and chloride and arsenic, you would see that you'd be a lot sharper.
One of the things I think is important for people is they hear these chemicals. It doesn't register as to what these things are and where they come from. They fluorinate the water, but then also people use fluorinated toothpaste. And so it seems like they're trying to double protect people. And in this case, it backfires because then you have a bigger dose than you actually need, because you probably would be just fine with fluorinated water or fluorinated toothpaste. But most people don't think about it, and they use fluorinated toothpaste and they're getting more fluoride than they actually need.
Absolutely. They're doubling down. Another thing is lead. And we talked a little about this off of camera. If you want to touch on that about water heaters, you brought up a good point, and then I can go more into depth, Cliff.
Yeah. So most people, they don't know that you should never use hot tap water in food. A lot of people, if they're making oatmeal or they're making some kind of food, they'll use the hot water because it speeds up the time. You put it on the stove and it boils in a minute or two instead of 5 minutes. But the thing that they don't realize is that the seams in the hot water heaters, they used to be made with lead. And there's also zinc and a lot of other materials that are used in the lining of the hot water heater. So they're getting these minerals and metals in the hot water that they wouldn't be getting if they use the cold water. So never use the hot water from the hot water tap.
I got a question, Giovanni. If you turn on the hot tap water, say early in the morning, you're going to wash your face, you get your hand towel and wash your face. Is there any effect to that to your body?
Yes. So everything is in the water. All you're doing is transferring it to a towel and you're putting it on your face. And we're going to touch a little bit more on that here later in the show. But your body's actually absorbing it. Your pores absorb a lot of liquid. I'll put it as a good analogy in nature. A lot of people have probably heard about the snake, the spitting cobra. One of the reasons it can kill you, it's because the truth is it doesn't bite. It actually spits a venom. What happens is if it touches anywhere on your skin, absorbs it. Therefore, you can still die because the venom is still active. Just because it touches your skin, even if you were to wipe it off, unless you can actually wash all of it off, and you usually can't, there's going to be a touch of it. You might feel a little adverse effects, but I look at water like that. I just use this analogy, but a very extreme one. And to touch on what Cliff was saying about the hot water heaters, a lot of people have softeners. And now the whole purpose of a softener is a chemical exchange between salt and the natural hard minerals like the magnesium, the potassium, the calcium. What happens with that is it causes a corrosion, and 99% of water heaters have a solid bar in the center of it that have those chemicals Cliff just described. They're made with lead, not just the corners and the connections, zinc, things that are actually deadly. And I need to make that very clear. These chemicals and some of these toxins are deadly to the body if you were to ingest or take them in pure, in their purest form. Now remember, they are being diluted in the water, but regardless, they still are not healthy for the body. And this comes back to, I want to touch on this a little bit, Cliff's book, and I would suggest everyone get it, plant-based. Eating plant-based naturally can help with detoxing your body from harmful metals, aluminums, things like that. So there are metal detoxes out there specifically for the metals, but being the fact this whole channel is about healthy living and just up-to-date information, plant-based diet can help with that too, and it can help balance out some of those chemical issues that you might get through water.
Absolutely. I was concerned about the lead. So I did some research because I was thinking that, okay, you're not supposed to drink the water from the hot water heater. And so therefore, is it bad to be showering with the water from the water heater because you get absorption through your skin? And so there is a bunch of research on that. What I found is you do get absorption through your skin from the hot water when you take a hot shower. The absorption through the skin of lead is like a 1/100th compared to what you get when you drink it and you ingest it and it goes through your digestive system. So if you ingest it, then it's a lot worse. If you have a hot water heater that's leaching lead, it's probably not good. You are getting some when you shower, but way more if you ingest it, if you're drinking it. Yeah.
Absolutely. The whole thing is, just like this episode and we talk about it, it's just having clean water. You never want to double down. You don't want to ingest it or you don't want to absorb it. So either way, it's toxic and you want to just stay as far away from it as possible.
You spoke about the shower heads. What particular type of shower head do people need to get?
I'm glad you asked. I'll have to send Cliff a link. There is a company that I work with that I have for quite a while, and we have a specific type of shower head. It does help neutralize chlorine. It puts natural, plant-based, food-grade vitamin C back into the skin. 5 to 7 years, you should replace your shower head. It's just because buildup over time, it's because of the water. It's not the head itself, but it's the water.
I had another thought on that, which kind of leads into the next subject also, which is water tests, because everybody is always getting bombarded with everything that you could think of. This is harmful, that's harmful, this causes cancer, that causes cancer. And so it's hard to have a priority to what you're doing. Getting your water tested will give you a sense of priority. If you come back and the water tests look really good, then you might take one course of action. If you test your water and you've got a serious problem, then that would demand that you go to more serious filtration or take more serious measures, like not even using tap water at all. So I think it's really important as a first step to know where you're at. Otherwise, you're flying blind. And so let's talk about water tests.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is a test that I got from the city of Sugarland, from their municipal, and they were 39 contaminants over the limit, legal limit.
Wow.
Which the government allows certain contaminants. One of those contaminants were 239% over the limit. And on top of that specific contaminant actually helped cause cancer. So how at least the city of Sugarland here in Texas is set up, if you look at that, it will give you what's all in the water, what the legal limit is, and if they're over that legal limit. Also, if they are over that legal limit, obviously I would suggest filtration for anyone at this point in time that lives in cities, because there are just certain chemicals that the human body is just not meant to normally absorb. Because we can live and we adjust sometimes, doesn't mean that we should. But on top of that, testing from the city of Sugar Land that they do, it tells you what the adverse effect to health is to the human body. Some of them, they don't say they have an adverse effect. And then other ones, they actually have not only a very adverse effect, it's very pinpointed to cancer, epilepsy, Alzheimer's. They have these tests out there. Now, every city might not be as specific as Sugar Land is, but those tests do exist. And back to your point, Cliff, I would suggest everyone go on and find out first through your municipal. If not, I would pay someone, and it is worth your health and your time to have someone come out and do a thorough water test.
Aren't there services if you're out where you don't have somebody that can do water testing, where they can send you I think it's polypropylene bottles and the kit, and then you send it back?
Yes.
So everybody has these that are accepted. Also, another contaminant that comes to mind, since you said Sugar Land, is arsenic, because in the area in Texas that we're in surrounding Houston, they did a lot of rice farming and also cotton. They use arsenic as a pesticide on cotton and as a growth stimulant, and it's in the soil. It leaches down into the water supply, this arsenic. That's a contaminant to keep your eye on also in a lot of these rural areas.
I got a question, Giovanni.
Absolutely. Arsenic is a big one, and it does cause cancer.
How much difference is the water between Sugar Land, Harris County, and Fort Bend?
There really isn't too much difference. When you talk about certain areas, it depends on whether you're a suburb or where the nearest city is. Where the number one thing is you have to find out where the main water source comes from. There are little towns that still have their own treatment plant, but it still doesn't take away from the main. Wherever the main is coming from, you really need to figure out that first. For example, let's say if you're in Houston by the city zoo, kind of downtown area, you have Ben Taub, the hospital, and you have Memorial Hermann not too far away. They're big on cancer research. What a lot of people don't think about now, and not only do people use radiation to supposedly take care of cancer, it can actually cause cancer. Microwaves tell you don't stand too close to things with radiation. People don't think out of sight, out of mind. What if I'm drinking radiation? A good analogy, when a radioactive bomb goes off, that's why everybody's afraid of an atomic bomb. Why? It's the radiation. And if the radiation affects a certain area, everyone knows for the next 100 or 150 years, and this is nature taking its course, nothing in that area is pure enough for a human to survive. Or if, like Hiroshima, a real life example, you have birth defects, lots of them. All of us here, I'm going to assume a lot of our viewers are older, even if you're younger. If you're at least 35 and up, kids in our time and decade didn't have cancer. St. Jude wasn't full. Kids weren't running around at 2 and 3 in daycare bald-headed because they had cancer. So this is something very new. And I want to touch on this one last point real quick. Also, the pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals are big. Yes, you get other, what I call mainstream contaminants, like the chlorine, the fluoride that the city will pump in. But then there's certain filtration that the city does not have to take out chemical contaminants from pharmaceuticals. So that's something else you should be very aware of and watch out for.
In fact, when you get the city tests, they don't even have the capacity to test for a lot of those pharmaceutical contaminants because they are chemically very difficult to detect, I think.
Absolutely. It's like the pesticides. Pesticides, it's never just the one thing, like you touched on, Cliff. It'll have arsenic in it. That might be one of the main components that can seep into water. But you look on the back of any pesticide, it has 1,000,001 different contaminants. So people need to understand the same tap water we grew up drinking is not the same tap water now. So people have this idea that it's all the same. Me personally, coming back to drinking healthy water, I think that's something that affects that chronic dehydration of the mind, is because sometimes we talk about things, but it really is not processing deeply that people are still affecting themselves and making themselves worse off in their health by not drinking pure water.
So what you're saying basically is that if people were aware and it was just visually right in front of you, you would never want to ingest these things. But because it's in the water and it's out of sight, out of mind, we're drinking this stuff every day and thinking nothing of it, but our body's still getting it. And if it's a carcinogen, then we have cancer developing and we're not even aware. We just dismiss it.
Absolutely. And other diseases, not just cancer, lupus, fibromyalgia, even diabetes. Obviously, if your body's off, water is the most basic thing in the body. It makes up your blood.
Who's responsible for our water being this way?
There are two tiers to this. First, I would say certain corporations, but second, at the end of the day, it comes back to you. We can't control what the city does. Our taxes are, there's just limits. Water sources in themselves are dwindling super fast naturally. I stayed in Oklahoma for quite a while, over 20 plus years. And in the state of Oklahoma, they sit on the world's largest aquifer, but it's a heavy drilling state. The city of Dallas, they actually were trying to buy our water from Oklahoma City because they're going through extreme water shortage. Boone Pickens, who's a big oil and gas guy that passed away, made probably about 65 to 70% of his fortune the last 4 or 5 years he was alive on selling water. So water is a super important resource we have to keep protected.
So you're saying that basically it's coming at us from all different directions, that all these different companies, there's just thousands of them, and all of them contribute to some extent. And then it's coming from the air pollution, it gets rained down, and then it goes into the water supply. And so we're basically getting bombarded as time goes on more and more from every different direction.
I think the biggest effect is oil and gas. Oceans being affected by plastic. That's a byproduct of oil and gas. And I'm not saying we don't need oil and gas. It's just new and better, greener ways would be very well looked upon. But at the end of the day, you have a hand in your own health and wellness. So before every bottle touches your mouth, before anything goes into your body, you have full control.
I guess to end this up, if I was watching this and I really didn't have this on my radar before, I'd be pretty freaked out. So I think for the next episode, a good starting point for episode 3 would be water filtration, which gives us some empowerment, because you feel out of control when you hear all this stuff and you can't even quantify exactly where it's all coming from. So it gives us the power back, being able to filter our water and know we're getting clean water. So I think that'd be a good starting point for the next episode, is water filtration.
Absolutely. And I'll end with this. You can't control a lot of things in life, but the number one thing is you have to see value in yourself. We're going to touch on this more specifically in the next episode, but water filtration is key. A lot of people, it always comes down to a money issue. I always tell people it's a lot cheaper to eat healthy, plant-based. It's a lot cheaper to drink the most pure water. Yeah, it's going to cost a little in the equipment. Obviously, the purification, if you're shopping, the more organic. But at the end of the day, it beats a 6-figure hospital bill with a 4-figure copay. So you can either do it little by little now, or you can do it in a lump sum when most people don't even have it because they're paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, that's something Dale says over and over again. Instead of hospital bills and getting cancer, you can get a $9 or $10 book and then just start eating plant-based, and you'll be much, much better off. It just makes no sense not to do it.
And then you don't have side effects.
Absolutely.
But America,
no side
we're
effects.
coming to an end. We had a good show. We'd like to thank Giovanni for joining us. And with these comments, go to the comments section. Let them know how you feel about it, what you think. Hit that subscribe button. Have a good evening.